Hi everyone, we're on page 118. It's quite a long Zoe chapter ahead. Okay. When the truck moved off, I stayed down. With the actual escape behind me, my mind was free for the first time to contemplate the enormity of the step I had taken, and I found myself overwhelmed by a combination of emotions, the strongest of which were regret, sheer disbelief, and rising panic. It was as much as I could do to stop myself jumping up and running after the truck, begging to be taken back. I stuffed my handkerchief in my mouth, closed my eyes, and fought for the control which alone could help me now. I didn't know how long I stayed there. I know that gradually I became aware that I was terribly cold and that the cry of gulls was everywhere. I pulled the wadded handkerchief from my mouth, wiped my face with it, and thrust it into a pocket with the aspirin and the cigarettes. I was shaking. "Stop it," I said to myself. "Stop this right now, Zoe, or you're finished. You're here, this is real. Regret's worse than useless, and panic will get you killed." I raised myself a little and looked over the mound. 300-400 yards away, some guys were working, sorting stuff into piles. A little way beyond them was a track, and beyond that was open ground, covered with weeds and scrub. There seemed to be no fence round the dump, nothing to stop me getting up and just walking away. I didn't do it though, because I had no idea what the guys' reaction would be if a subby kid suddenly materialised among them. What would they do? Kill me? They might. Nobody'd ever know. They could belt me over the head and make a hole and plant me, and I'd be gull feed, part of the dump. I looked around. Off to my left was where the trucks checked in, a little hut beside a muddy track. As I watched, a truck drew up and a man came out of the hut and stood talking to the driver. Not that way then. Directly behind me were great drifts of garbage. It was impossible to know what lay beyond them, so I looked to my right. A track marked the boundary of the dump in that direction too, but it must be at least a quarter of a mile away. There were no vehicles though, and no people I could see. I was in jeans and anorak. If I got up and walked that way without hurrying, maybe nobody would notice me. One thing was certain. If I stayed where I was, I'd either be discovered or I'd freeze to death. I stood up and started walking. Nobody shouted. The guys who were sorting went right on doing it, and the man by the hut continued to talk to the driver. I plodded on with my head down in imitation of the chippy's dejected gait. I was walking away from the city, but that was all right. Once off the dump I could circle round, and it was only 11:30. I made it to the track with muddy shoes, but no trouble. I began to circle the dump clockwise, watching out for people. When I saw the little hut in front of me, I made a detour through the scrub, not returning to the track till I'd left it way behind. When I'd walked a half circle, there was a road, half choked with weeds, which seemed to go toward the city. I turned onto it, and after that I didn't see anybody for quite a while. I plodded on, looking for the tallest block in town. It's a bit vague, the tallest block in town. If I'd had any idea this was going to happen the last time I saw Daz, I'd have got the street and his apartment number. And if I'd had more time, I'd have done some other things too. I'd have worked out a way to take some of my warmest clothing with me for a start. As it was, I only thought how I'd need both hands free to hold onto that truck, and so I'd brought nothing that wouldn't go in my pockets. I could have worn some extra things as a way of getting them out, but I hadn't. In short, this had to be the worst organised expedition ever mounted. The weeds thinned out as I approached the city. I was passing between broken buildings now, and I began to see people. First, there were some little kids in the ruins. I guess ruins make neat places to play if you're a kid. This bunch were standing in a ring, laughing and poking with sticks at something on the ground. I didn't look their way because I didn't want to attract their attention, but as I drew level, one of them, a tiny, dirty-nosed girl, called out, "Hey, missus, come see what we got." I pretended not to hear, but then the others started calling and I was scared their noise might bring people, so I went over. It was a dead man. They'd found a dead man and filled his nose, mouth and one ear with twigs and grass stems. They'd removed his boots. A little boy was wearing them around his neck. If this had been Silverdale, I'd have shooed the kids away and called a cop. Here, I was at a loss. I said, "This poor man is dead. You should tell somebody, an adult, not be fooling around like this." They gazed at me as if I was something from another galaxy, and the biggest boy, the one with the boots, eyed me shrewdly and said, "He's ours, missus. We found him. You want to buy his duties?" Duties is chippy for clothes. I shook my head. "Boots?" He lifted them so I could see the soles. "Good boots for your fella, going for peanuts." I don't have... Stamps then. Give me stamps." I'd been about to say I had no fella. He thought I had no cash. I shook my head again. "Look, I don't want... You shouldn't be doing this. This is a corpse. You can get diseases, all sorts of nasty things. What would your parents..." I didn't know what I was saying, really. I just wanted out of there. The boy peered at me through red-rimmed, narrow eyes. You're subby, ain't ya?" His companions regarded me now with a fresh interest. I nodded. "Yes, that is, I was. Not any more. I ran away. Do you know a man called Daz?" He eyed me scornfully, ignoring my question. "Ran away?" He laughed jeeringly. "Get away, missus. Subbies don't run away. You kick out, right?" I shook my head. "No, I ran away. Do you know a man called Daz? He wears a black leather jacket." "Black leather, granny. You kick out, ain't ya? Want a place? Give me peanuts, I'll show you a place. Good place, dry." He grinned, thrusting out a grubby palm. I shook my head once more and turned away. Behind unbroken cloud, the sun was falling westward. I knew if I didn't find Daz before dark, something would happen to me. Watching these kids had convinced me of that. They were just little kids, but they looked and behaved like rats. Thin, darting, glitter-eyed rats. If they'd known what was in my pockets, I think they'd have killed me for it, small as they were. I hurried away, and their cries pursued me. "Kick out!" they shrilled. "Kick out, kick out, kick out!" I was now approaching the centre of Grandma's beloved Roehampton, or what was left of it. I'd spotted a very tall building some minutes before, and was hurrying toward it in the hope that it would turn out to be Daz's block. I'd seen a bit of the town from Ned Volstead's car the night we went chippying, but it had been practically dark, and anyway, you don't see things all that well from a car. That brief glimpse certainly hadn't prepared me for the paranoia of desolation which now unfolded around me. The streets were cracked and broken and littered with every sort of debris. Long puddles of foul, stagnant water lay in gutters clogged. Here and there sat the rusting carcasses of cars and trucks, completely stripped and without their wheels. Some were evidently in use as dwellings, because I saw makeshift curtains strung over glassless windows and signs of life behind them. And these weren't the worst places. Among the rubble of smashed and burned-out buildings, people had made shanties out of crates and plastic sacks and cardboard boxes. Little fires smouldered before some of these, and listless children huddled in the smoke, poking the flames with sticks. There was an unpleasant smell, strong in some places, faint in others, but always there. I'd just begun to think every building in the city must be derelict when I came to a row of little shops. Plate glass windows gleamed dully behind heavy gauge wire mesh, and there were crudely painted signs above. One said, "Rudy's Dudies, bought and sold, cash stamps exchange." Another said, "Tucker Savage, dog on guard." A small homemade handcart stood outside this shop, and in the cart, swaddled in rags, lay a baby. As I gazed around, the enormity of the step I had taken began to dawn, and I wondered whether, if I were to run all the way back to the dump and get under a truck, I might get back into Silverdale before anyone realised I'd gone. It was pure fantasy, and I knew it, but a sort of panic was growing in me, and my mind was searching frantically for something to keep it from snapping. I knew if I dwelt on my situation now, I'd start screaming, and that if I screamed forever, it wouldn't change a thing. With a terrific effort, I tore my mind away from thoughts of undoing what could never be undone, and walked on into how things really are. How things really are. Daz had told me he lived with his mother in an apartment, and, like you do, I'd informed pictures in my mind of what I imagined his mother and the apartment would look like. They were nothing fancy, these imaginary pictures. I'd seen apartment blocks and a selection of their inhabitants through the windows of Ned's car, and of course I'd been fed all my life with stories about how chippies live. I knew I wasn't about to walk into some antiseptic glass palace and meet a beautifully turned-out matron whom Daz would introduce as his mother, but I'd no idea how bad it would actually be. From the outside, the block was like the ones I'd seen. They were the usual damp-stained walls and broken, boarded-over windows, and the usual knot of dirty, red-eyed kids round the doorway. It was when I got through the doorway things started to get heavy. I mentioned a smell before, the one that was strong in some places and faint in others. Well, that was the first thing that hit me, and I do mean hit. I was in a dim lobby with a cement floor and rough plaster walls that were covered with graffiti. In front of me was a flight of cement stairs and an elevator. I could tell by just looking at it the elevator hadn't worked in a long, long time. The floor felt sticky under my shoes, and there were puddles and piles of trash in corners. I nearly gagged on the smell. The kids, squealing and chattering, had come in after me. Their voices echoed in the bleak lobby, and they plucked at my clothes. "Daz," I asked, "does Daz live here?" A small boy jerked his head towards the stairs. "Free up." "Thanks." The half-landing windows were boarded up, so the stairway was dark, and I kept stepping on squashy things I couldn't see. There seemed to be 4 apartments on the first floor, but only one had a door, so maybe the others were unoccupied. On the next floor, 2 apartments had doors. A fierce-sounding dog threw itself against the inside of one just as I was passing. All of the third-floor apartments had doors. I stopped by one that had the number 11 painted on it and knocked. Some of the kids had followed me up. They stood on the stairs watching me through rusty iron rails. I heard footsteps and a voice, suspicious, called, "Yeah?" I knew that voice. "It's me, Daz, Zoe." A bolt scraped, the door flew open, and we were in each other's arms. We were in a little hallway that had the same cement floor as the landing outside, only cleaner. Not clean, but cleaner. The walls had once been yellow, but damp must have gotten in, and now the paint was curled and blistered, and flakes of it lay on the floor. There was a smell like toadstools. 4 doors led off this hallway, 1 in front of me and 3 on my left. The one straight ahead was open and led to a kitchen. When Daz closed the outer door, the only light came from there. Daz took my hand and led me to the last door on the left. As he opened it, he called out, "Hey, Mum, look, we got a visitor." The forced cheerfulness was transparent, and I felt like I was walking into an ogre's lair. Scattered across the floor were bits and pieces of matting and threadbare carpet. Apart from these, the room contained only an iron stove whose chimney went out through a window, and 2 chairs, one each side of the stove. The chairs were saggy, colourless armchairs, and in one of them sat a woman who might have been made to match. With a son like Daz, she couldn't have been much more than 45, but she looked at least 70. She was wearing a lumpy green cardigan over a black turtleneck sweater and a long grey skirt with a ragged hem. Her thin legs were bare, except for blue ankle socks, and her feet were encased in what looked like a man's broken boots. Grey hair hung in greasy rat rails to her shoulders. White, bony fingers gripped the armrests of her chair, and she gazed at her son with lustreless eyes. "Visitor? What are you on about, Daz? Who is it?" "I'm Zoe, Mrs..." I broke off. I didn't know her name. I'd run away from home to be with someone whose name I didn't even know. Daz said, "This is Zoe, Mum. She's from Silverdale. She'll be staying here a while." "Staying?" The woman leaned forward. A subby lass? Staying here? Have you gone balmy, lad? Do you want to get us both topped? How'd you get out of Silverdale, anyway? Under a trash truck, I said. I rode out under a trash truck. Aye. And what you done? That's what I'd like to know. What they want you in Silverdale, eh? Nothing. I haven't done anything. Mrs. I ran away to be with Daz. Daz? What's our Daz got to do with you? She looked at her son. Only one reason, subbies, Rum. They've done something, see? DS wants them. She stays here, place will be crawling with law and orders before you can turn around. Get her out of here, son. Get rid of her. Daz looked from me to her. I can't, ma'am. Where's she supposed to go? Out on the street? Anyway, I love her. Love? The woman laughed wheezily. You telling me you fell for a subby girl after what they did to Ardell? Forgot, did you? He shook his head. No, ma'am, I didn't forget. I've never forgotten Ardell, have I? Wanted to join Dread and get him back, only you weren't that keen, were you? Huh. Wouldn't have you now, though, would they? Subby lover, they'd call you, and they'd be right. Anyway, she can't stay here. I want no raids on this house. We've trouble enough. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this old lady's hospitality stinks, but she was right. They execute chippies who'd harbour fugitives or kidnap people, and I'd come here thoughtlessly, expecting to be taken in. I realise now what I'd done, and if there'd been anywhere else for me to go, anywhere at all, I'd have walked out, but there wasn't. Death was waiting outside, and so I had to stand there while Daz and his mother fought over me. In the end, they compromised. The old lady said that since it was dark now, I'd better stay till morning. Daz winked at me. I guess he thought his mother would relent tomorrow and everything would be fine. I wasn't so sure. With that, and missing my family, I'd have spent a lousy night if they'd put me in a featherbed. A damp mattress on the floor and a coat to cover me left me no chance. My feet were like chilled mutton, and I think I cried all night. Right, this is a obscenely long chapter, so I'll stop there for now. Yeah, cool. Hope you're all right. Bye.